Magandang araw! Did you see what's inside my kitchen cupboard? Samot-saring pagkain na local at imported. Mga instant noodles na gawa sa Pinas at mayroon ding nagmula sa Indonesia at Japan. May imported at local na corned beef din. Napansin nyo ba ang McCormick? Isang US brand, ngunit bakit kaya nakalagay sa packaging ng mga produkto nito ang katagang Made in the Philippines? Were you able to count the canned sardines? Alam nyo bang ang lahat ng iyon ay produkto at gawang Pinoy? Today, we are going to talk about globalization and the Philippines. Ano bang naiisip ninyo kapag Pinoy global brands? Siyempre, Jollibee. Global brand ba talaga ang Jollibee? Aside from it, may iba pa bang Pinoy brands na namamayagpag sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo? Let's find out! Globalization is the massive interdependence of countries or nations and their citizens in the economic, political, technological, and socio-cultural aspects. With that in mind, does the Philippines have an important role in the global economy? If there are any, what are those roles? And are there any Filipino brands that can be considered global? If you want to sell your product outside the Philippines, you need an approval from the government of that country. Whatever laws related to trading that they have over there, you need to be aware of them. If your government has a good relationship with that country, it will be easier for you to engage in trade with it. The technology of the internet, computer, planes or ship, and mobile phones will help you and your prospective clients and customers to develop a smooth transaction. Siyempre, bago ka makipagnegosasyon sa kung sino ang iyong kontak sa ibang bansa, pag-aralan mo din kung ano ang kultura ng mga taong nakatira doon. Halimbawa, dahil sa Islam ang pangunahing relihiyon sa kanlurang Asya, ang produkto mo na may kinalaman sa baboy ay hindi papayagan ng basta lamang. Kung ito ay hindi nga baboy, ito ay dapat na nakapasa sa halal certification. Ayon kay William Schurman, ang globalization daw ay paghahangad na magkaroon ng malayang kalakalan sa pandaigdigang ekonomiya. Idinagdag din niya na ito daw ay ang paglakas at paglaganap ng mga kanluraning ideya, pamamaraan at sistema sa daigdig. In the economic context, it is simply defined as the movement of people, products, and services across nations and countries. Yes, even language like English is now a product. Do you know that English itself was a product of globalization? How so? From Germany, the Angles and Saxons brought English to Great Britain after the downfall of Roman Empire. With the confluence of local and other languages like Norse, French, and Latin, the English language that we now speak came to being. The language reached the shores of North America because of the European colonization. When the 13 colonies gained their independence, they embarked on colonization and imperialism. The Philippines became a colony of the USA with education as a tool for colonization. The Filipinos learned English by heart. Karagdagan nga pala, sa mga Briton natin unang narinig ang wikang Ingles noong 1762, kung saan ay isinuko ng Espanya ang Manila at Cavite sa bansang Inglaterra. So going back to globalization in the context of economics, a good example is a Korean studying English in the Philippines, whether online or as a foreign student. Many schools and language centers in the country offer short or long-term English training and tutorials to Koreans. South Korea and the Philippines have a good political relationship with one another. Our visa policy is relaxed. Siyempre, let us not compare our technology to that of South Korea. Industrialized country ito. It doesn't mean that we don't have the technology. Otherwise, the Philippines will not become the 10th largest country host for Koreans. Included in the technology is the increasing number of flights between Korea and the Philippines. Aside from warm climate and the hospitality of the Filipinos, it is the low-cost language education in the country that attracts them. Yes, even cheaper than those offered in South Korea. This is a result of globalization. Koreans come here as students instead of being colonizers. This affects our tourism, the economy, and the political and socio-cultural ties with South Korea. Sa kadahilanan ding ito ay naging bahagi ang Pilipinas ng Korean Wave. Ito ang paglaganap ng kanilang estilo ng pananamit, pag-aayos sa sarili, musika, palabas sa telebisyon, at pelikula sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo.
Globalization is perhaps a new term, but definitely not a new phenomenon. During pre-colonial era, our Filipino ancestors were already engaged in international trading. Through barter system, they traded agricultural and home manufactured products with foreigners like the Chinese, Japanese, Malays, Vietnamese, Indians, and the Arab traders. These Asian nations have historical accounts of these economic activities, mentioning pearls, mats, fabrics, animal hides, fruit, and vegetables as the main exports of the Philippines. Ang ating mga sultanato at rahanato ng mga Muslim sa bahagi ng Visayas at Mindanao ay tanyag sa pagmimina ng ginto at perlas na ginagamit sa paggawa ng alahas. Sa teknolohiya, ang ating mga ninuno ay tanyag sa paggawa ng mga dekalidad na bangka at iba pang sasakyang pandagat na ginagamit upang maglayag sa bahagi ng Asya. These are the Chinese ceramic jars and wares unearthed in the country. You can find thousands of them in our National Museum. These are called piloncitos. This metal nugget is considered as the earliest form of currency used by our ancestors living in Tondo, Namayan, and Rajanate of Butuan. Many of these coins were made of gold, considered a precious metal in the country since ancient times. Piloncitos circulated in the country between 9 to 12 centuries CE to remove the inconvenience of barter system. This is a historical account of Spanish conquistadores about the skills of our ancestors in mining and crafting gold. This kind of currency was also found in Indonesia and believed to be related to money system of ancient Javanese and Sukhothai kingdoms. This is the depiction of Japanese traders living in the Philippines according to the Baxter Codex. This jar may look simple to you, but during ancient times, it was valued by Japanese traders. It is called Rusun jar or Luzon jar, named after the island of Luzon, used for Japanese tea ceremony before. This is still considered a treasured antique in present-day Japan. Read the description of Rusun jars in the Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas by Antonio de Morga, a Spanish conquistador. There is no doubt that the Philippines textile and Filipino weavers are brimming with skills and talents. After all, it is embedded in our roots. Since ancient times, our ancestors have been fashioning fabric materials and dyes from the nature. We should be proud of the fibers like piña and abaca because they are known worldwide. Aside from being the largest exporter of abaca, we also produce buri, bamboo, sisal, and salagao fiber. Visit the National Museum and be amazed with a section exclusive for the Philippine textile industry named The Artistry of the Philippine Textiles. Experience how our brothers and sisters from different regions hand weave and knit stuffs made up of indigenous resources and dyed naturally. What's more, each and every fabric from countries' aboriginal tribes is unique in pattern and color. In 15th century, European countries began their voyages and conquests of many countries. Thus, Ferdinand Magellan reached the Philippines in 1521. The Philippines became a colony of Spain in 1562. This colonization changed the lives of the Filipinos drastically. Spain took control of the Philippine economy for 3 centuries. In the context of globalization, the famous galleon trade became the primary instrument in the spread of local merchandises to different parts of the world. It consisted of 2 ships that sailed each year, one leaving the port of Manila and other one coming from the port of Acapulco, Mexico. It is noteworthy to mention that Spaniards, Indians, and Chinese were greatly benefited by this international trade. In the long run, majority of the products that the galleons brought to Mexico were Chinese goods, with only a few Filipino individuals enriched. The Philippine industries and their workers were exploited heavily. By 17th century, Royal Economic Society of Friends of the Country and Royal Company of the Philippines widened the commercial relationship of Spain and the Philippines. These companies made a positive impact on the Philippine agriculture by encouraging Filipinos to become farmers of mulberry, sugarcane, coffee, spices, and tobacco. During this time, the Philippines became the largest producer of tobacco in Asia, together with the pride of being one of the best in the world. At this time, Industrial Revolution began in the United Kingdom and later spread to Europe. Machines and equipment replaced manual labor in manufacturing goods. In the second phase of Industrial Revolution, towards the end of the 18th century, various inventions and innovations paved way for new industries to engage in large production. This development reached the shores of America and other nations outside Europe. To sum up the role of the Philippines in globalization during Spanish era, the country was the source of raw materials and labor for 300 years. He is Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, a conquistadores and the first Governor General of the Philippines. He is Andres de Urdaneta, another conquistadores, and because of his excellent chronicle, he is credited for the discovery of the galleon trade routes under the command of Legazpi. This is the route of the galleon trade. Do you know that the galleon also reached and embarked in California? Feel free to read the journal of William Lil Skurtz at www.jstor.org. These are the porcelain wares of China, while these are the merchandises that come from the Philippines and brought to Mexico. These coins are used in the Philippines. They were minted in Spain and Mexico. By the turn of the century, the Philippines became a colony of America. Our economy transitioned to market economy, which gave many Filipinos opportunities to participate in retail businesses. New industries such as telecommunications, transportation, mining, and banking emerged. However, the Americans controlled the major industries and the national economy. 1906 marked the year that 15 Filipino sakadas or laborers were employed by the Hawaiian Sugar Planters Association. From then, Filipinos became the third largest ethnic group in this U.S. state. Back then, these Filipino migrants could be considered as OFWs in today's context. With regards to export of Filipino products, heavy restrictions such as tariffs and quotas were applied, while American goods and services flooded the Philippine market. American multinational and transnational companies became huge. Some of these are Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Clorox, Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, and Kodak. These imported goods were promoted heavily, thus resulted to colonial mentality. In addition to this, Americans themselves started migrating to the Philippines and operate their businesses. The mere role of the Philippines in globalization during the American period was the market for imported products from food, household items, clothing apparels, and even books. This is the view of Binondo, the world's first Chinatown, from the Jones Bridge. These are the currency used in the Philippines during the U.S. colonization period. This is an interesting chronicle of an American discussing the possibility of opening a sugar plantation in the country. Read on. The Japanese occupation and the World War put a halt at the national economy. Well, buong mundo naman apektado ng ikalawang digmaang pandaigdig. Isa nga lang sa pinakadurog na bansa ang Pilipinas dahil dito naganap ang labanan sa pagitan ng Amerika at Japan. Sa wakas, natapos ang World War II noong 1945. At the last years of the Commonwealth, President Osmeña and Rojas supported the Bell Trade Act and Tidings Rehabilitation Act, which granted Americans parity rights, the equal access of Americans to explore, develop, and use the country's natural resources. These acts clearly continued the dominance of American MNCs and TNCs and their brands in the Philippines, despite our country gaining independence. These are the paper bills printed by the Japanese government during the Second Philippine Republic under Jose P. Laurel. Due to hyperinflation, Japan issued 1,000 and was considered as Mickey Mouse money. The succeeding presidents of the Philippines adhered to and adopted the economic policies of the United States of America. Under the administration of Rojas, Quirino, Magsaysay, Garcia, and Macapagal, the USA remained to be the biggest trading partner and foreign direct investors of the Philippines. The pesos was also pegged to the US dollar. When Marcos assumed the presidency, the Philippines became a founding member of ASEAN. This promoted free flow of goods among member states with low or no restrictions. Many Filipino products were exported to Southeast Asia. The Philippines was able to produce rice enough for the national consumption, and with the surplus being exported. The country was also the world's largest producer of coconut. Under Aquino, trade liberalization furtherly opened the country to foreign companies and investors. The USA and Japan remain to be the biggest trade partners, with Japanese brands dominating the household appliance category, such as Sony, Panasonic, Hitachi, Sharp, Sanyo, and Casio. The US MNCs and TNCs continue flooding the market with their products such as Colgate, Palmolive, Dole, Ivory, Tupperware, Pepsi, McDonald's, and KFC. Still, the country's trade is imbalanced, with the volume of imports outweighing the exports. Sa sobrang sikat nga ng mga imported products na ito, naging mga katawagan na sa mga produkto ang kanilang brand tulad ng Colgate at Tupperware. Due to globalization, many Filipinos decided to find better opportunities abroad. These economic migrants are called overseas Filipino workers. Aside from becoming the backbone of the Philippine national economy because of remittances, OFWs became instruments in the widening of popularity of Filipino products in the international scene. Since the time of Ramos, Estrada, Arroyo, and Aquino, the number of OFWs who have professional and technical skills and talents continues to surge, with the USA, Saudi Arabia, and UAE as top destinations. Sadly, for the past 50 years, the country's trade pattern is in a downtrend. The excessive imports, together with the devaluation of peso, increased in petroleum products, further continued creating trade deficits. There were only three times that the Philippines had a balanced trade: year 1973, 1999, and 2000. The rest was always a trade deficit. Our agricultural export products, which were once on top of the world ranking, were also on a decline. Our neighboring Southeast Asian countries are now in the forefront of global agribusiness. Thailand and Vietnam are now the world's largest producer of rice. Indonesia has overtaken us as the largest producer of coconut. Do you know that the farmers and food scientists of these countries were once foreign students in the Philippines? Yes, they were educated by Filipino teachers. Globalization made it possible for foreigners to study in another country.
This is Germany, the largest and strongest economy in Europe, and the fourth in the world, an industrialized country that manufactures and exports vehicles and machineries such as BMW, Volkswagen, Siemens, and MAN. Aside from machineries and equipment, you are probably aware of the German global brands like Adidas, Puma, Nivea, Dove, Boss, Bayer, and Deutsche Bank. The United States of America is the number one economic superpower for more than a century now. Though China has overtaken the USA when it comes to the purchasing power parity, the US remains to be the biggest in nominal GDP with $22 trillion. That's a 6 trillion more than China, the second in ranking. And as the sole leader in the fourth industrial revolution, the economy of the USA is expected to grow leaps and bounds in the coming years. This is Saudi Arabia. She has the world's biggest reserve of petroleum products such as gasoline and diesel. The oil is a capital good that each and every country needs as their source of energy. With that being said, Saudi Arabia and Iran are major players in the world economy. Japan is the world's third largest producer of automotive vehicles and also the third largest economy. She is an industrialized country that manufactures and exports advanced manufacturing solutions. With regards to Japanese global brands, you need not look far. Those brands are the appliances and vehicles in your respective homes and garages. Some of them are Panasonic, Sony, Casio, Nissan, Honda, Suzuki, and Toyota. This is Thailand. This is Indonesia. They are powerhouse when it comes to agricultural driven economy. These countries grow, process, and export crops that are of international standard. They are at the forefront in agribusiness. This is the Philippines, one of the 11 countries in Southeast Asia. How is the Philippines doing in the global economy? What are her strengths and weaknesses in the global arena? Let's discover it today. According to William Schurman, countries and their leaders have different views of globalization. In the recent national elections all over the world, countries have seen major shifts in political ideologies that have affected the relationship among countries, especially in political and economic aspects. One of the best examples of this is Donald Trump, a business mogul who owns at least 500 business entities. In the past US election, Trump was very vocal on threatening American companies, as well as other foreign businesses, to stop offshoring and outsourcing jobs to developing countries. Since becoming the president of the world's most powerful country, he has implemented the American First policy, and with the US elections happening this 2020, the world is watching. Globalization began many centuries ago, but during the age of colonization and imperialism from 15th to 18th century, Western powers extracted natural resources and exploited their colonies. Since the establishment of the United Nations after World War II, neo-colonialism emerged. So does the new form of globalization. World organizations played a critical role in the new form of colonialism. International Monetary Fund, World Bank, World Trade Organizations, Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, and North American Free Trade Agreement have been very successful in promoting trade liberalization ideals to their developing nation members. After 60 years, you can clearly see the huge disparity of the income and GDP per capita among the nations of the world. The GDP and GDP per capita are both used to measure the economic performance of countries. If you want to see how the economy is doing with its population and how the citizens are performing domestically, the latter is examined. Regardless of their population, whether it's China or India with billions of people, or the USA with 300 million Americans, or Canada with a population of just 39 million, these countries have invested on technology to forward and become industrialized. These countries become the leaders in the third and fourth phase of industrial revolution in their respective regions. The economy of India is one of the fastest and the biggest in the world. Despite this, India ranks 139th in the real GDP per capita. Take a look at these two cases of international trade. See how India is benefited and harmed by globalization and international trading. Like the Philippines, India's service sector is one of its strongest assets. Both countries are excelling in the BPO industry. Now, let's take a look at the performance of the Philippines in the field of shipping, business process outsourcing, and export industries. Do you know that more than 80% of world trade is carried by sea? Shipbuilding industry is a global value chain. GVC refer to an international production sharing wherein the people and activities involved in the production come from various countries. The Philippines shipbuilding industry is one of the biggest in the world. For almost 2 decades now, it ranks fourth. This industry has two divisions: the commercial shipbuilding, which focuses on carrying commodities and finished products, and the offshore segment, which mainly focuses on exploration of waters, transfer of oil rigs and anchors in the petroleum industry. In 2015, this industry accounted for 2.6% of total exports, while the shipbuilding and repair rake $1.6 billion. These are the factors that make shipping industry a robust sector of the economy. Being an archipelago and lying on the key trade locations in Southeast Asia, the geography of the Philippines is advantageous in establishing ports for the smooth loading and unloading of cargoes. Port operations are essential for this industry to succeed. Globalization has made maritime transport complex, thus resulted to new sizes and forms in ships and other water vehicles. Our coastlines with substantial water depth are ideal for building accessible shipyards. Our country has young and skilled workers that are readily available for employment. Our Filipino workers are known to be adaptable, fast learners, and industrious. Not to mention that wage scale here is lower compared to Korea, Singapore, and Japan. Domestic and international shipping companies enjoy enticements as stated in Republic Act 9295. These include tax, non-tax incentives, and import duty tax exemption. This year, Maritime Industry Authority, or MARINA, is considering the extension of these incentives. This is a good news for the market players in this industry. They will now have a chance to engage in fleet modernization and improve their port infrastructures and facilities. Its shipyard is located in Redondo Peninsula, north of Zambales. In 2017, Hanjin Shipping was declared bankrupt by the courts of South Korea. This is the biggest bankruptcy in the Philippines. It could no longer pay its debt to the five local banks. It is the world's biggest and most significant bankruptcy in container transport industry. The company owed its creditors $10.5 billion. According to encyclopedia.com, outsourcing or contracting out is a procedure involving the delegation of non-core operations or jobs from internal production to an outside resource. Outsourcing is a business decision that is often made to focus on core competencies. A subset of the term offshoring also implies transferring jobs to another country, either by hiring local subcontractors or building a facility in an area where labor is cheap. Why do companies from the USA, Australia, the UK, and other countries contract the service of a third-party provider that sets up their infrastructures in the Philippines? For many reasons, and one of them is the readily available young workers who possess excellent English communication skills. Of course, salaries are markedly lower. This is how outsourcing and offshoring merge when it comes to BPO industry. The advancement in information technology further made globalization multifaceted. This industry is considered a hallmark of the Philippine economy. From 600,000 employees and constituted 7% of the total GDP in 2016, the industry now employs 1.3 million Filipinos and is estimated to record 12% of the total GDP in 2019. It also raked $49 billion of foreign direct investment in the country. Soon, it might catch up with the remittances of our OFWs. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, the Philippines is still at a good position according to David Lichiu, the founder of Lichiu Property Consultants. He said that many Chinese companies are considering the Philippines as the prime location to set up their disaster recovery centers. We learned that globalization has made it possible for a foreign company to operate a business in another country through outsourcing or offshoring. This is how business licensing enters the scene. Investopedia defines licensing in business as any business, organization, or individual that has been granted legal permission by another entity to engage in an activity. The permission or license can be given on an express or implied basis. Investopedia further explains that a licensee has received legal permission from another party to conduct some sort of business over which the other party holds some control, ownership, or authority. The licensee may pay outright for this permission, known as a licensing fee, or may make payments based on the results of the business arrangement, known as licensing revenue. One of the most common examples of a license agreement is the franchise. Under a franchise agreement, the franchisee is granted permission to use the franchisor's assets, such as supply chain, trademarks, or other intellectual property for a certain period of time. Typically, the franchisee is granted exclusive rights to those assets within a certain localized area. Another example is brand licensing, which is defined by Investopedia as the licensee is permitted to use a licensor's trademarks and logos on its own manufactured products, such as sports apparel. Also, a noticeable rise on the ODM brands, which stands for Original Design Manufacturer, should also be considered. A company designs and produces a product and will be sold to other firms for rebranding and selling. Ang daming mga local brands ngayon sa ating merkado ang kumukuha ng produktong ibinebenta sa mga ODM. Nariyan ang CDR King, Cherry Mobile at marami pang tindahan na nagbebenta ng mga electronic equipment. Ang Nokia brand ng cellphone simula ng taong 2016 hanggang ngayon ay sa ODM na din umaasa. Mayroon ding OEM na ang ibig sabihin ay Original Equipment Manufacturer. Kung bubuksan mo ang iyong iPhone, isang sikat na tatak ng telepono mula sa Amerika, ang mga bahagi nito tulad ng LCD, baterya at iba pa ay gawa ng mga OEM sa China, Japan at South Korea. Maaari din na ang produktong ito ay assembled naman sa Vietnam. You see, globalization has transformed trading into a complex phenomenon involving several countries. There is no denying how powerful MNCs and TNCs in the world economy are. The richest countries with the biggest economies all have TNCs operating all over the world. These are in the sectors of pharmaceutical, automotive, information and technology, food and beverages, bank and financial services, and energy. These multi-billion-dollar industries cause harm to their host countries in the sense that their citizens lose jobs that are being outsourced to developing countries due to cheap operational and production costs. Ayon naman kay Ginoong Ronaldo Mactal, maraming negatibong epekto ang MNCs at TNCs sa host countries nito. Isa na dito ay ang Let's have a look at some products of MNCs that are made and manufactured in the Philippines and are sold worldwide. A Toshiba USB flash drive. A stuffed toy sold by Disney. And Cream Silk, a product of the Unilever. Chang Beer of Thailand and Sinalco Cola of Germany are imported products available in the Philippine market. While these two Filipino products are sold on the shelves of Seafood City Supermarket, an Asian supermarket in the USA. Now, to further discuss these business terms related to globalization and international trading, let's continue watching. This is Mamacitas, a Filipino brand that is made in the Philippines and is exported to different parts of the world. This has a big market in Western Asia due to the citizens of those countries that love spices and herbs in their food. This is the mee goreng noodles that has recently entered the Philippine market. This Indonesian brand and product is manufactured in Indonesia as well. You will know that it is exported to many countries just by looking at the languages that appear on its packaging. In the Philippines, it is imported and distributed by Mondial Trading Corporation and Gardenia Bakeries Philippines. Who doesn't know 555 sardines? Well, if you don't, you are not a Filipino. The Philippines belong to the top 10 producers of fish and aquatic resources in the world. No wonder that sardines, tuna, tilapia, bangus, and galunggong are sold in low prices. Kung inyong maaalala, ang isang lata ng sardinas ay nagkakahalaga lamang ng 13 to 15 pesos bago ito patawan ng buwis noong nakaraang taon. The fishing industry of the Philippines is a major sector of our agriculture. Nararapat lamang na pangalagaan at proteksyonan ang ating mga karagatan, ilog at iba pang anyong tubig. This Balducci Brown may sound Italian, but is an Australian brand. It is a marketing strategy. Because Italy is known to produce excellent pasta, let's examine the packaging and find out its origin and where is it exported. Manufactured and packed by Uremo, Thailand. Exported to Australia, Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and Saudi Arabia. This is the world's famous San Miguel Beer, a Filipino brand that is sold globally and is truly a global brand. It has plant in Hong Kong, Thailand, and other parts of Southeast Asia. San Miguel Beer products sold in the USA are from Hong Kong, hence, you will see the product of Hong Kong, China on its packaging. Last year, it announced that it was considering opening a plant in the USA. Regardless of where it is manufactured, San Miguel Beer is a Filipino global brand. This McCormick product is a world-famous American brand. Let's examine its origin. Clearly, McCormick Philippines is an offshore company. Globalization has enabled McCormick to legally operate in the Philippines for reasons. Two of these are low labor and operational cost. Tiger is the Singapore's biggest lager brand. Why is this product a good example of globalization? Let's have a look. Brewed and canned by Asia Brewery Heineken Philippines, Cabuyao City, Laguna, under license from Heineken Asia Pacific Limited, Singapore. Heineken, the Dutch brand, bought Tiger Beer of Singapore and Asia Brewery of Lusiatan, the maker of Beer na Beer. If you were Heineken, buying out other market players eliminate the competition. A CEO has many reasons to sell a company or its division. It can be bankruptcy, like Mitsubishi being bought by Nissan, or for profit, like Mang Inasal being bought by Jollibee. Jollibee and Heineken clearly want to maintain their rank 1 position in their respective field. No wonder Heineken is now the world's largest brewery. Jollibee remains to be the number 1 food chain in the country and is now expanding internationally. It recently bought Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, an American coffee chain. This is what you call globalization. Now that you have learned that there are many Filipino brands that have made it to the international scene, there are also local companies and MNCs that have established manufacturing plant and factories in foreign land. Some of these are Universal Robina Corporation, San Miguel Brewery, Jollibee Foods, Maxis Group Incorporated, and SM Investments. Penshop has a branch in Cambodia and Thailand. Do you know that this picture of Kwek Kwek was taken at the supermarket in the USA? These are Pinoy products that are made in the Philippines and sold worldwide. The shots are taken from various supermarkets all over the world. Do you recognize them? The opposite of trade liberalization is protectionism measure. If industrialized countries are pushing developing countries to globalize, protectionists call for government to intervene and impose trade barriers. If we revisit the economic principle of the theory of comparative advantage, the Philippines was once a leader in rice production and technology. Sadly, we are slowly losing that advantage to our neighboring Southeast Asian countries like Thailand and Vietnam. That is because of globalization. Protection of infant and choice industries is one of the many ways to protect our local economy. Exposing newly established industries to foreign companies is disadvantageous because they simply cannot compete with TNCs and MNCs. These foreign companies are expert in their own respective field. Hence, infant industries must be given a chance to perform in domestic market. Goods that are vital to the national interest and security of the country deserve to be protected. In the USA, they have Export Administration Act of 1979 that protects US origin software and technology. In Germany, their small and medium industries are referred to as Mittelstand. The government is now trying to convince Mittelstand to embrace digitization and strengthen themselves domestically in order to compete with global brands. Halos 24% ng magagawang Pilipino ang nasa industriya ng agrikultura. Kung ang sektor ng pagsasaka, manukan at palaisdaan ay nagtala ng napakagandang performance sa taong 2019, hindi ba nararapat lang na bigyang pansin at proteksyonan ito ng ating gobyerno? Nang pumutok ang COVID-19 pandemic, maraming kumpanya ang hinimok ang Department of Agriculture na payagan ang pag-angkat ng poultry. In the short run, the low price will benefit the consumers, but in the long run, ano ang magiging epekto nito sa ating industriya ng poultry sa Bulacan, Pampanga, Ilocos Norte, Iloilo, Cebu at Zamboanga? Kapag nagsara ang mga manukan, mawawalan ng kabuhayan ang ating mga kababayan. With the GDP contracting 2% compared to the last period, let us take a look at the performance of the economy in the past 2 months with the following economic indicators: inflation rate, government spending, gross international reserves, and peso-dollar exchange rate. With the economy taking a nosedive in April, let's be hopeful that our third quarter is going to be green.
Kung si William Schurman ang tatanungin, globalization is simply the westernization or Americanization of the world. Sang-ayon ba kayo sa kahulugang kanyang ibinigay? Gaano kahalaga sa inyong buhay ang mga produkto at serbisyo ng Amerika tulad ng Internet, Intel, Mac, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Android, YouTube, at iba pa? Now that you have learned about the historical background of globalization in the country, try to reflect on this question. Is globalization a blessing or a curse to the Filipinos and the Philippines?